1984. Bolo'bolo pamphlets, stickers, posters, and signs are spread worldwide in the major languages. ABC disco knots develop in many neighborhoods, cities, and regions. More and more streets are blocked to automobile traffic. 1985. In certain smaller regions, the machine loses its influence, and independent bolo'bolo areas develop unperceived. State apparatuses suffer from substruction attacks. 1986. Toward the end of the year, there exists a planetary leopard skin of regions, autonomous countries, Udo, single bolos, leftovers of the machine, amputated states, military bases. General disorder breaks out. The two superpowers give up their block game and unite into the USSR, United Stable States and Republics. 1987. 200 autonomous regions hold their first planetary convention, Asadala, in Beirut. Hunger and states are abolished. The USSR disappears without formal dissolution, and without having burned its red and white flag with the blue star. 1988 to 2345. Bolo'bolo. 2346. Bolo'bolo loses its strength as the whites, a kind of cultural epidemic, spreads and replaces all other types of bolos. Bolo'bolo lapses into an age of chaos and contemplation. 2763. Beginning of Uvuo. All records on prehistory up to 2763 have been lost. Tohuak puts a new floppy disk into the drive. What? Let me introduce you to your new favorite political treatise. Bolo'bolo, that's one word, both B's lowercase, asterisks in the middle for some reason, is a proposal for a utopian anarchist society, written in 1983 by Swiss writer Hans Widmer, better known by his pen name PM. It's a wild little book that I think deserves discussion, so I'm going to be, discussing it. I should preface all this by saying that I am not myself an anarchist. If you are one, you're more than welcome to stay, but this is probably going to be a bit of a hate watch. No ill will towards you guys. Yours is a beautiful dream, and one can do a lot worse on the ideological front than Emma Goldman. Posadism comes to mind. But I just can't buy into the optimism. I don't know, maybe it's me. My mother showed me House MD when I was like 6 for some reason, so I got about 9/10 of my personality from Hugh Laurie. Call me a cynic, but I believe that human beings are stupid goons who need a firm hand to beat them into being slightly less scummy. That hand is the state, and we can argue about what gestures the hand makes, how long its nails should be, whether it wears a glove or not, but I just don't think it's worth our time discussing whether or not we should cut it off. All that being said, here's a detailed plan for the amputation. Actually, before we talk about PM's ideas for the New World Order, we should probably discuss what he thinks about the present one. I will say that since this book was written in 83, some of its ideas regarding the place of communism within the global system didn't exactly age all that well. Other than that, though, PM's analysis of the problems of modern life is actually surprisingly fresh and lucid. Bolo'bolo starts with a depiction of the state of nature, or human society before the emergence of civilization. It was an idyllic time, when people fished or picked berries for like 2 hours a day, and then spent the rest of the time bettering themselves through cave painting or making love in the woods. You know, pretty bog-standard, primitive communism stuff. Basically the secular version of Eden. In this case, the fall of man is our descent into state-based societies after we nibbled on the fruit of private property, with agriculture playing the role of the serpent. PM's term for all the ills of post-agrarian society is the planetary work machine, a self-perpetuating social system whose sole goal is to increase human activity regardless of how demeaning or even pointless this labor is. While Marx would lay the blame for this system at the feet of the bourgeoisie class, PM explicitly dismisses this idea. He writes that there simply aren't enough ultra-rich puppet masters to bear responsibility for the continuation of the work machine. The industrialists are just another part of the mechanism, and I'd imagine PM would probably think of the uber-wealthy as victims of it, at least in their own way. The work machine isn't so much a system of exploitation as a social contagion, or a millennia-long mass hysteria. There are no bad guys in bolo'bolo's philosophy, just the system, man. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd like to believe this is true. This idea is tender and kind, but unfortunately the world isn't. In reality, social systems, no matter how self-perpetuating, are headed by people. They're always working to someone's advantage, and the first step to destroying one is always to knock down the people on top of it. Anyway, the work machine is all-encompassing. There is no escaping it. PM believes that any so-called reforms, any tinkering we perform to make the machine run more humanely, are basically meaningless because they fail to dismantle the big core issue that is the mechanism itself. The only solution is to kill the machine. Problem is, we are the machine. So, yeah, how do we get around that one? The solution lies in PM's breakdown of the machine's various parts. He categorizes the workers of the world into 3 different types: A workers, B workers, and C workers. A's are information workers. They are the brain or circuit board of the planetary work machine. A's are predominantly, but nowhere near exclusively, white male office workers in first world capitalist countries. B's are production workers, manufacturing the goods which keep the machine going. They mainly labor in factories in socialist countries in the Second World's Eastern Bloc. C's are reproduction workers, creating new workers to man the machine. They're the destitute tribesmen of the post-imperial Third World, as well as the housewives of the First. A's, B's, and C's all make deals with the work machine, receiving various boons in exchange for their labor. Obviously, some of these deals are better than others, but they're all Faustian scams in one way or another. The machine functions by keeping the various worker types divided. PM posits that a revolution by any one type of worker would ultimately be doomed to failure because if, say, all the A's liberated themselves, they wouldn't be able to do without the goods and services provided by the B's and C's. The only path toward permanent freedom from the machine would be for the A, B, and C workers to build relationships and support systems with each other totally outside the confines of the machine. Apparently, the key to human liberation is a pen pal correspondence between a New York accountant, a Leningrad tire plant worker, and a Kalahari bushman. Who knew? These support systems, or ABC disco knots, excellent term, would begin covertly, taking place beneath the gaze of the machine until they build up to a critical mass, at which point they would reveal themselves and supersede the machine, rendering all previous social dynamics basically obsolete overnight. Okay, all relatively standard, all relatively sane. But so is communism in its diagnostic phase. Let's hear Doc PM's prescriptions. We'll start with the Ibu. What's an Ibu? You're an Ibu. I'm an Ibu. We are all Ibus, and we are all the Ibu. The Ibu is the collective consciousness of mankind. Nothing exists outside of it, so to keep itself entertained, the Ibu develops a split personality, making believe that there are billions of other Ibus when in reality there's just one. The Ibu also dreams, but it's a weird, masochistic creature, so everything it imagines is a horrible nightmare. To me, this seems like a pretty Buddhist or Hindu interpretation of the world, where so-called reality is just an illusion we all share. But then again, bolo'bolo offers no escape route out of the nightmare, no enlightenment or waking up, just a series of very radical reforms to improve the dream. Let's discuss those. To PM, the ideal organization of society is a bolo, a mostly self-sufficient commune consisting of roughly 200 to 300 Ibus, or what the normies would call Piyopal. The worldwide system of bolos is known as the bolo'bolo. Most Ibus across the Asa, or spaceship Earth, live in bolos, but here and there you'll find the occasional nomad, hermit, and traditional nuclear family dotted about. Private property has been drastically reduced, but not completely abolished. Every Ibu is entitled to a taku, A 50 by 50 by 100 centimeter, or 20 by 20 by 40 in freedom units, locked wooden box. This box, the space inside it, and the objects occupying that space are all yours, and they're all that's yours. You can put anything you want in the box so long as it doesn't make noise or smell. No one can open your taku but you, and no one may ask what's inside. It could be gold bars, or porno mags, or a machine gun. That's not for anyone else to know unless you choose to share that information with them, which is considered a pretty significant sign of trust. Every Ibu has the right to fosi, or unrestricted travel between bolos, and to receive silla, or hospitality, from any bolo in the world for at least one day before moving on to the next town. They also have the right to challenge other Ibus to a duel, because of course they do. However, these fights would rarely be about resources, instead focused on ideological conflicts or romantic disputes. That's because all material needs are delivered by the bolos. Every bolo is responsible for providing essential services for its members and guests. These obligations include the yalu, or daily ration of 2,000 calories, the gano, or housing, and the bete, or medical care. The biggest of these is the yalu, and PM places significant emphasis on food. Individual households wouldn't be responsible for meal prep. That duty would instead fall to what amounts to a camp cook. Cooking, like most activities, would cease to be a universal chore and become something reserved for people who were passionate about it. Everyone would love what they're doing all the time, so no one would ever really be working. Except during labor camp time, but we'll get there. Back to food. Each bolo has what amounts to its own restaurant. Meals are an event, and people will travel from town to town to sample the uncountable cuisines that develop. Despite its focus on agriculture, the bolo system doesn't require a totally rural lifestyle either. Cities will continue to exist, with many urban bolos sitting side by side. These may occupy old skyscrapers or apartment blocks, which would all be connected with sky bridges or tunnels. City bolos would grow their food in greenhouses, or else have farming exclaves in discontinuous territory. However, PM says that large cities will need to be, quote, thinned out to just 500,000 residents, except New York, London, Paris, Rome, whose cultural character is tied to their size, i.e., important places. Sounds sort of like ethnic cleansing, but whatever. Plus, why does he get to decide which metropoli get axed or not? Why do 1.5 million people have to trudge across the city limits of Houston with gunny sacks slung over their shoulders, but all the cheese-eating surrender monkeys get to stay in Paris? Is Paris better than Houston? Absolutely, but you see my point. Walking through PM's ideal city sounds like a joy. Basically, every courtyard has been turned into a big chicken coop, and the potholes in the streets expanded to make way for sprout farms. Buildings are ripped down or merged willy-nilly, turning the entire environment into an unnavigable labyrinth of foot and bicycle paths. Poo and garbage is left to rot into biogas to power this utopia. That power is relatively scarce, and in the winter, people will abandon certain rooms of their dwellings and dress in layers. If that sounds goddamn miserable, don't worry. As PM says, the cold per se is not a real nuisance. Ask an Eskimo. Personal hygiene has also plummeted somewhat because apparently the real purpose of showering was to disinfect us for the work machine. I'm sorry, PM, but changing your underwear is not a theater of domination. Anyway, bolos, being tiny hamlets of handfuls of people, can operate self-sufficiently only on the most basic level. Each will develop its own niche according to its culture, or nima, and will need to trade with other bolos if it wants anything besides its own local specialty. This trading will occur at marketplaces, or sari. At this point, PM includes a little exchange rate table. It's fantastic. Here's some highlights. The going rate for bicycle repair is 200 apples. Hairstyling, 5 bales of lamb's wool. The price of 100 pounds of chili powder is musical instruments. He does not specify which ones. 100 pounds of strawberries can be acquired for 1 large slab of marble. 300 pounds of quince jam will run you 60 lobsters and 200 pine seedlings. PM also places a strangely high value on feta cheese. 20 pounds is worth 100 bottles of local wine, while 1.5 gets you 40 cotton sweaters. While the chart is present in the book, it isn't really referred to. PM seems to realize that doing this without money would turn the entire economy into a giant video game barter side quest, and proposes that marketplaces should each have their own system of currency, like poker chips in a casino or tokens at Chuck E. Cheese. To my mind, all this would do is keep people tied down in one area, like how mining towns used to issue their own monopoly money to trap workers there forever. Or at least that's what this system would do if the market's computer didn't randomly erase your token balance every 2 years, leaving you destitute. Did I mention that each Ibu gets something called a nugo, which is a necklace with a cyanide pill hanging on it? Good thing, because if you lived in this society, you'd probably want to kill yourself. When PM discusses the prospect of an Ibu offing themselves, he uses the profoundly self-aware phrase, escape from its improved, reformed nightmare. Oh, yeah, the Ibus are referred to by the pronoun it, which isn't dehumanizing at all. Speaking of dehumanization, what about murder bolos? PM addresses the central issue of anarchism of why, in the absence of authority, new authorities wouldn't reemerge. He admits that a few raider or warlord bolos would develop, and I really couldn't follow his reasoning, but it basically amounted to something along the line that these predatory factions wouldn't be a big deal because they would end up burning themselves out. But that kind of vagueness is more of an exception than a rule in the book. Part of the problem with bolo'bolo is that while its society is relatively well thought out, the longer PM thinks about it, the closer he comes to describing something that sounds a lot like a state. For example, he admits that there will naturally be a disconnect between the tasks Ibus want to do and the tasks which will be necessary to keep everyone alive. He tries to rectify this through kene, or compulsory work, in which Ibus are temporarily drafted into community service and hard labor. The writer also predicts that bolos could have up to 500 feno, or barter agreements with other bolos. At that level of intricacy, it seems pretty obvious that some kind of administrator will become necessary. PM also says that bolos will organize themselves into local or regional groups, and allows for a pretty complex series of nested subdivisions. 10 to 20 bolos will form a tega. 10 to 20 tegas is a vudo, and 20 to 30 vudos makes a sumi. Ethnic enclave bolos will serve as unofficial ambassadors between regions. Townships of multiple bolos will have a legislative council. However, PM tries to tamp down on the pretty obvious authority they would wield by giving neighboring townships voting powers to counterbalance this. I love this detail. That would be sort of like if Mexico and Canada each got 2 senators in the US Congress and they spent all day mocking the other representatives and voting against America's interests. A global congress, or Asadala, will meet each year at the twin capitals of Earth, Beirut and Quito, Ecuador. Sure, great choices. Bolo'bolo also makes the concession that it would be redundant and wasteful for individual bolos to each have their own heavy industry, and that for the sake of the environment, pollution-heavy industries like, say, steelworks would be built and operated on a regional level. Kinda sounds like we started at anarchy and wound up at labor camps, bureaucracy, and central planning. All these gripes I'm bringing up aren't to say that bolo'bolo is bad or that I didn't have a great time reading it. I really did, and I can't say that about most material like this. I really enjoy the playful tone the book takes. More political treatises could use something like that. The lexicon PM introduces is fun and inventive, and I think it really demonstrates a willingness to approach his subject matter with a well-needed levity. After all, he is pitching utopia here. It shouldn't exactly be a dour exercise. I also really appreciate the emphasis the system places on the variety of different bolos and their interests. Just off the top of my head, PM mentions Franco bolos, Italo bolos, Retro bolos, freak bolos, high-tech bolos, veggie bolos, punk bolos, dada bolos, Sado bolos, maso bolos, Sparta bolos, parabolos, cat bolos, weed bolos, blind bolos, crazy bolos, diabetes bolos, and coagulopathy bolos. I'm not going to lie and say that the idea of walking down the road and encountering subculture after bizarre little subculture isn't appealing. It feels like Bolo Bolo would be a land of little surprises. You'd never run out of new stuff to experience. Here's the problem with that. It's nonsense. Anarchists, buddies, I get what you're pitching. I really do. And I like the sound of it in a theoretical sense, but at the end of the day, I find you guys naive for the same reason I find libertarians naive. Both ideologies believe that human beings are basically good, and that it's our institutions which make us bad. That if the state would just bugger off and commit seppuku, we could unlock human potential. But, have you seen human potential? The last thing you ever want to do is unlock that shit. The story of history has been the tale of gradually locking up human potential so it can't hurt anyone anymore. You want utopia? Look outside. Society has reached as close to perfection as we ever will, and history is all downhill from here. We're all going to die. There is no hope. Good night.